What's up, future shredlords? Welcome back. Death to the fingers. We'll be taking a break from the playing today. I know I throw a lot at you every single week, and there's a couple of you mad lads that hit every single lesson. So keep up the hard work and keep your nose to the grindstone. If you keep practicing at this level, you will be an absolutely insane level musician. So kudos to you. But it can't just be about, practicing the guitar and the instrument all the time. Sometimes you got to look for sort of motivation and to find new ways of sort of expressing yourself musically. And the best way to do that, obviously the most direct route, will be to be listening to other amazing guitar players. So ever since I made the super clickbaity title, which was, the 10 best guitar instructional videos of all time, one of my most popular. Wow. Silence, guitar player, just show us the true legends. We don't care what you have to say. I totally get it. There have been quite a few questions with respect to, what albums sort of like influenced me instrumentally to sort of move in the shred guitar direction. So we're going to go over 10 of them today. The 10 I think are the most important, and see how they match up on your list too, kind of thing. So without further ado, here they are. All right, right out of the gate, obviously we have to acknowledge that Van Halen is my #1 influence. So basically from Women and Children First to Fair Warning to aspects of Diver Down and whatnot, and then even, elements of 5150. Those were monstrous, like earth-shattering. And sit there and just be like, jaw drops to the floor and you're just like, damn. So I got it out of the way. Let's get on to the list now. So #1 here is just going to be essentially Satch and Vi. And the albums I chose are basically Flying in a Blue Dream and Fire Garden. And they're both for the same reason, actually. It's like, obviously, Passion and Warfare. It sort of, set the stage for Steve. He's starting to burst on the scene, obviously, with Flexible. If you listen to that one, you're like, wow, holy smokes, that's crazy. But obviously solidified it on Passion and Warfare. But you see an evolution start to happen, and it starts becoming about, creating more immersive soundscapes with the actual instrument. And then, of course, the overall bizarreness and innovative approach towards creating melodies and playing the guitar and using in the context of a song and all that good stuff. And Satch is the same way, just in a different sort of like spectrum. Instead of being more, in the Lydian side, you're more over in the blues side here, right? So that's just it, is you have to sort of recognize that it's the ability to innovate on the instrument. That's what these albums are really teaching you, because you hear a lot of music on here where they're just doing things that were at the cutting edge of actually playing the instrument at speeds or using techniques that had never really even been considered before. Just like, obviously Van Halen battered down the Doors with, Mean Streets and stuff like that, using techniques that, nobody had ever even considered that stuff, let alone heard it, let alone be able to put it together. I mean, that's still one of the most difficult licks of all time to play. But of course, Joe and Steve sort of took that art form and then started to apply it to whole songs. It wasn't just the intro anymore. Now it's like the entire piece of music. And so all of those combination of elements, the innovativeness of the player themselves, the immediacy of the music, it just kind of hits you. You're like, oh, that's a really great tune. And you can just listen to it over and over again and just enjoy it. And 3 being, of course, is like the spread, musically speaking. So some songs are in one vein, but of course they just start spreading it around. So it's not always just like super hard rock or whatever it is. There's a wide palette of musical interests being introduced into each of these albums, which gives it this sort of peaks and valleys, for, excitement and just being like, okay, let off the gas a little bit. And that's just that's just it. It really sort of exhibits all of those essential elements about a piece of music that keeps someone interested, like a movie. If it's just action all the time, it gets boring. So again, these guys are teaching you something with this finished product. And that I learned when I started to really think about and analyze their music. I mean, I was never going to play it. I knew that. But I was like, there's something here to be learned. What is it? And that was what I came up with, is this idea of being innovative on the instrument, but also the push and pull between doing more extreme stuff and then letting off the gas and doing more sort of like mellow, down-to-earth stuff. And once you understand that huge dynamic and contrast, well, your own music now starts to exhibit this really sophisticated musical function. And there it is. Boom. You've elevated. Next. All right, Tony Macalpine. Next up here, obviously, Maximum Security and the Planet X stuff. Now, obviously, this is the live album. Oh, my God. It's ridiculous. Apocalypse 1492 or whatever it is. Like, get out of here, kid. The thing here is that with respect to Maximum Security, I learned that you could marry up the technical elegance of classical music with the down and dirty sort of rock sensibilities of like 80s metal and stuff. And Tony does it to perfection. So not only can he just absolutely obliterate the fretboard with like the more bluesy licks and stuff like that, but then he just has like gears 6, 7, 8, and all the way up to like 20 to go into like, the super shred mode and just, peel the frets off his guitar. So that's the thing is again, he also exhibits this incredible sense of melody. There are so many moments on Maximum Security where you're like, damn, that's a juicy guitar line or an absolutely jaw-dropping solo or phrase of the solo. You're just like, what? What? Now, with respect to the Planet X stuff, it's more about breaking the rules. They were kind of pushing the envelope and seeing how like rhythmic patterns and complex sort of polyrhythms can work to your advantage. Obviously, with stuff like that, in my opinion, they kind of pioneered the whole, periphery stuff and all the rest of that by kind of kicking the doors down. Now, listen, there were other bands doing this kind of stuff beforehand. Meshuggah was doing it and all the rest of that. But in a way, with the Planet X stuff, it's the marrying of that kind of idea, the Meshuggah thing up with like fusion, jazz, metal, or whatever it is. Because it's kind of hard to put your finger on what they're doing. It's just crazy virtuoso musicianship. Insert label as you will. But this is required listening, especially the live album, to be like, you got to be that tight live. Yeah. Right. If you learn anything, that's one of it. Yngwie Malmsteen live in Leningrad's another one too. Just listen to that and be like, man, he is so on fire tonight. Like just absolutely perfect shred runs of jaw dropping amazingness. Just like, what? Right. So there it is. Macalpine. Next. All right, next up is Greg Howe. So I got introduced to Greg basically through the REH video, right, which I already talked about in the previous video here. But when I bought his album, which was, I think, his first release off Shrapnel, I was like, yeah, not my favorite. I think I gave it away to another person or traded it. But then years later, when I was sort of scouring through a pawn shop, just buying CDs like I used to do in the old days, I came across Hyper Acuity. And oh my God, I was like, well, I'll give it another chance. I don't recognize this one, so who knows? And did this one ever just drop me? Greg comes out and just levels you. It's some of the most breathtaking shred of all time. The speed, the technicality, the quality of the riffage and the licks, how sick they are. There's not much more for me to say. Honestly, he's one of the preeminent guitar players of the 20th century. I think he gets way overlooked. in favor of other people and stuff like that, and underappreciated for his sheer ability on the instrument. It's truly frightening. He's like, you know, he deservedly belongs alongside the giants like Jason Becker and all these other sort of like, you know, the Sean Lanes, the top of the top of the top, the best of the best, just absolute, you know, ridiculous level musicians, not just talented, but also able to play at a level that is just incomprehensible. And that's Greg's level. And Hyperacuity proves it. Enough said. Next. All right, George is next on the list here, obviously after Van Halen. Start getting into Dokken in his playing, and of course he's got some similarities there with all the sort of like, you know, tips and tricks and whatnot with the whammy bar and all of his killer technique and whatnot. But honestly, it's just his uniqueness as a player in and of itself. And in the early days, I was like, the songs are pretty good, you know, the great solos and whatnot, but they weren't blowing me away until Back for the Attack dropped. And then just, it was the triumvirate, the guitar, the skeleton guitar, Nightmare on Elm Street, and the awesomeness of Back for the Attack. And all of a sudden, wow, man, did they ever come out swinging. For a band that was as dysfunctional, if you will, as Dokken was at the time that they were doing the recording. It's amazing that they actually got through that. So kudos to them, because man, is that ever a killer recording. But the long and short of it is that George is just, again, one of these super innovative players. Listen to his stuff on Sacred Groove, or you got the stuff on Lynch Mob, especially the whatever, the self-titled there. Next level stuff, songwriting wise, and with respect to the playing. There was another video too called Guitar Young Guns, I think it was, and I think you can still watch it on YouTube, where George is in the studio with Max Norman doing solo outtakes for the Lynch Mob stuff. And again, I saw that video when I was like, whatever, 15 or 16 or 17 or whatever it was. I don't know. But that's all it took, man. That's all it took, was just seeing him do that stuff in the studio, and the rocking nature of the music, and that, you know what I mean? Like, I fell in love. And I was like, I want to do that too. I fell in love with the music. I didn't, you know what I mean? Not the lifestyle or being in the studio or anything, because a lot of people get enamored with the gear and they're like, I want to be in that environment too and doing that stuff. For me, it was just like, I got such a high off just listening to the music and watching him just rock out. And I was just like, I really want to do that too. So that was one of the greatest moments. Outside of hearing the intro from Mean Streets, watching that video where he does the outtakes for Lynch Mob was one of the key moments that made me be like, I really want to commit to this instrument enough to be able to play at that level. George Lynch. Next. All right, Warren's next on the list here. Obviously, this Out of the Cellar, I think it came on the heels of essentially Quiet Riot's Metal Health. Right, so metal was already breaking huge, and all the pretty girls were like into metal musicians and stuff, and hanging their posters up and doing all that kind of nonsense. And it was hard not to notice. And this was a really, really big album, because obviously Round and Round and stuff. But surprisingly enough, it was my least favorite song actually on the album. It was all the other ones that actually got me all fired up and stuff. And it was mostly because of Warren's solos. I mean, the songs themselves are pretty great, but when he kicks into the solos, man, does he ever just take it in a great direction. And that's just it. He was another guy taking another sort of whack at the minor pentatonic scale, like Van Halen, like George Lynch, but sounded completely, you know, of his own accord. There is no mistaking his licks for anybody else's, you know what I mean? Like, he's got his own sort of definitive style. And that's really what I look for in a guitar player. If I can instantly recognize your solo, then I'd be like, you know what I mean? Because obviously you're doing something that's caught my attention enough or made me remember after all this time and be like, oh yeah, no, damn, that was sick. Right. So there's obviously the sort of social influence there with respect to this album, but also the playing, the catchiness of the music. You know, there's a lot of lessons here to be learned with respect to just sort of simplifying music down to some core elements and then just being able to deliver at a super high level like this does. Right? It's everything is neat and compact. But what it has to say, it says it directly and it just gets the job done. And really that's what you're trying to, you know, internalize when you listen to a guy like Warren's playing. Not only is it ultra creative, but he can just jam so much into like 40 seconds where it doesn't feel like it's a flurry of notes or it starts meandering or anything else. It's just like every solo, you're just on the edge of your seat, just being like, damn. Next. All right, next up here is Alex Skolnick, obviously from Testament, The New Order. I was like, this is technical thrash to perfection. The solos are just phenomenal. Just breathtaking, man. Wow. I think he's like 19 years old, 18 years old, something ridiculous like that. Effectively, I think it was just, you know, the hybridization, I guess, from the Yngwie approach, where he starts to incorporate diminished ideas into his own playing, but it doesn't come off sounding like Yngwie. You know what I mean? It's got a darker, more sort of like early death metal sound. And that was very impactful on me because I was like, that's really badass. Right? And he was one of the first guys that I actually heard do it at like a super high speed. So I was like, I'm all over this. And that was a wise decision because their discography is pretty impressive. They've got a really, like a lot of really good albums. So his playing is top notch. The songwriting is top notch. And again, it's also a great example of, you know, if you look at Metallica, Kirk Hammett perfectly balances out James Hetfield when it comes to leads and rhythms. One guy doesn't actually overshadow the other, like you've seen in other bands, where there's one player that's just absolutely phenomenal. I would say something like, I know this might get me in trouble, but Megadeth with Dave Mustaine and Marty Friedman. I think there's a bit of a skills and knowledge difference there. They're both amazing. I love Megadeth. Obviously, it's one of my favorite thrash bands of all time. Dave can do no wrong as far as I'm concerned, but honestly, let's just be real. But the playing thing, it's not the same, right? So there's that. But when you're talking about Testament, you don't get that situation there. Again, you see the balancing aspect, and that's really what you're looking for. And that's what Testament taught me, not only about the introduction, the bridging, and the bringing over of these elements. When you hear it from one guy, you're like, I don't want to do that because it just makes me sound immediately like this other person. Instead, take the Testament approach and try to incorporate that idea creatively into your playing and figure a way to do that out, right? Just like Alex did. And so there it is. I was like, he was the first guy to really blow my mind with some of those more psycho diminished runs. And of course, the ultra fluid sort of alternate picking and legato runs and sweeps are just next level too. So what else can I say? Alex Skolnick, badass as hell. Next. All right, next up is Racer X, obviously. I'll never forget this one because we were vacationing in Turkey. And during the day there, we would actually retire to the hotel to take a nap. And oftentimes we just lay there in bed because it's too hot to do anything and listen to music or take a cold shower because man, oh man, does it ever get hot there. You don't quite understand how hot it gets in the desert or those desert type regions. We almost died there. Same reason, dehydration. That's another story for another day. Same place too, Turkey. Oh my God, it had it in for us. But Racer X live in extreme volume, man. I'll just never forget the twin guitar attack and the absolute perfection of, you know, Bruce Bouillet and Paul Gilbert. I don't think that I need to go on and on and on about it. I mean, Paul is a storied guitar player, from Racer X to the whole Mr. Big stuff and the drill, everything. He's a legend, right? He's an absolute legend. And so that's, but this album particularly was, again, this sort of weird hybridization between, you know, the virtuoso level musician, because everybody in this band is nuts, right? From the singer down. And that's just it. When you hear it live, you're just like, God damn. Like, you know, like it's near perfect, but with intensity and ferocity and whatnot. You're just like, get out of here, kid. So, and the selection of music, I think they did a double one too. It's Live in Extreme Volume 2 is another one where they do even more cuts. It's just, it's perfect. It's perfect. In my opinion only, of course, but these guys just, this was honestly ground zero for like the need for speed. This was the album that made me be like, I want to play really fast. Like, no doubt. Like, not just fast, but as fast as humanly possible. So, and this is what made me think of it too. I'd already been listening to shredders for a while and they were all pretty good, but there's an aggressiveness about Racer X. There's an attitude about their playing. There's like, you know, an immediacy to the riffs and the licks and stuff like that, that just, they bore right into your head and you're just like, wow, just devastation. Next. All right, next on the list here has got to be Nuno Bettencourt. Honestly, in my opinion, Porno Graffiti is probably one of the most impossible albums to play cover to cover on the guitar. You have to be a true disciple of Nuno Bettencourt to want to subject yourself to that level of torture, because it's just so insane. There is so much stuff going on there. Pick a song. They're all ridiculous. All of them. And some of them are just absolutely terrifying. Like the song Porno Graffiti itself is just like, holy smokes. What? What just happened? Decadence Dance, He-Man Woman Hater. Man, those ones are just like, forget it. Just forget it, kid. And then, of course, you see him just, you know, unleash with the solos. It's not just the speed, it's not the note selection, it's the sheer sort of creativity, the arrangement. You know, and it's the same with the first album. When you listen to the last track, Rock-A-Bye Me or whatever it's called, and he does that very iconic solo now where he does the arpeggio sequence and all the rest of that stuff. Like, nobody had ever heard that. No one had heard anything like that. Not like that. And then, of course, just listening to the first album, you're just like, every song is jam-packed with so much riffing and whatnot and madness. It's just like, how does this man have this much energy to actually invest? There's not a single piece of real estate inside the song that Nuno hasn't just, you know, put the magic to, essentially. And that's just it. I've seen him do it live with no problems. It wasn't like, oh, you know, he was struggling a little bit there. No. Just, again, perfection. So that's why Nuno's on the list here, is because, again, Porno Graffiti was one of those albums that effectively took everything I thought I knew about the 80s and 80s music, you know, from beforehand, and just threw it right out the window. Like it was a before-after moment. They're like, this is an evolution of the genre right here, with this incorporation of the funk and all the rest of that stuff, but just the whole next level. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, wow. Like, there were amazing guitar players like Harry K. Cody. He was almost on the list, but his music didn't quite measure up. And that's the thing. He would be on this list if his music was as intelligent, as complex as, say, Extremes. But that's the magic of Nuno, is that he had the ability to play but not overplay. to impress and sort of wow without getting onerous or sort of like overbearing. So a true master of the art, and his music is an essential to be studied. So that's why he's on the list. Next. All right, Tosin Abasi is next on the list here. Obviously, he's the last of what I would call the next wave of shredders. I mean, he's the only one that's really left of all those people. There are some other people doing their thing, and I respect that, but obviously they didn't quite get to the same level as Animals as Leaders, touring with Dream Theater and whatnot. So it is what it is, but honestly, again, this was what I call an innovation just in shred generally. So they took the old 80s model from the shrapnel years and they just crumpled it up and you're gone. And just, you know, just obliterated. They just nuked it from orbit. I don't know. Whatever you want. But it's just, I don't even know what to say. Again, this dude is so sort of in tune with the instrument and innovative that he's like coming up with whole new techniques and stuff, this thumping and all the rest of that. So, and incorporating that into his music and whatnot and doing a really great job too. So there's this synergy happening, right? But of course you have to be into sort of like more experimental music to be able to appreciate what somebody like Tosin is doing, because he's such an advanced musician. He can't just do the, you know, the Shakira 9 to 5. He needs like, you know, he needs total musical madness so that he can just unleash his full potential. And that's really what you're seeing here is a man that is just capable of almost any technique. Tapping, sweeping, he's got his thumping thing now. He's pretty damn good alternate picking. So what's there not to like? And again, name me another instrumental band that is sort of pushing the envelope like Animals as Leaders. I don't think you'd find one post sort of 2010. So that's why he's on the list. Absolute beast of a player. And holy hell, can that man play? Next. All right, last but definitely not least, it's Micheal Romeo from Symphony X. Obviously, I think it's 5, but it might be V. I'm too lazy to look it up. This album, though, basically, this really slapped me out of the whole Dream Theater is King, you know, subroutine, if you will. Talk about a band that can just perfectly incorporate the cinematic elements of movies and whatnot into their music and then just take the music into account. Like, holy shit. Wow. Every solo crafted to perfection, played perfectly. You know, of such breathtaking scope and skill that you're just like, man, oh man, wow. And then to see him do it live too. I've seen him do it live and I'm just like, get out of here. That's why he's on the list, is because this is like one of those uber musicians I was talking about, the Sean Lanes, the Jason Beckers, the Jason Richardsons of the world, where they're just so utterly perfect as musicians, as guitar players in this case, that they just pick up the instrument and it becomes one. They just synergize. It's like an extension of their actual physical self. And they just can create the most jaw-dropping music of, you know, by any metric, in almost any style too. So it's just like, wow. So as far as the album is concerned, you know, this was a huge one because at this time I was really into the whole prog metal stuff, Dream Theater, Dolly's Dilemma, a whole bunch of other ones, Spock's Beard and Porcupine Tree. What's that one with... Transatlantic, that was it, and all that good stuff, right? So when these guys dropped, I was just like, get out of here, kid. And then I just couldn't stop listening to them. And they had a string there of about, what, 5 albums? And there's the early stuff too, which is really good, but they had that string since about V or 5 or whatever, all the way up to about, I don't know, the Odyssey, where it's just like, holy smokes. Every album just absolutely jaw-dropping. Every solo just a monument unto itself. That's 6 months worth of study just to be able to play it. Just wow. But I mean, if you're really serious and obviously, you know, if you're looking for the tapped arpeggios and stuff that we did from one of the previous videos, I think it was the last one, there it is. Seek out the tabs for Micheal Romeo's and start learning some of those tapping sequences, which are basically all string skipping arpeggio tap sequences. And there it is. There's a whole practice session. You don't have to come up with your own. You just got to be able to recognize those ones and go out and grab them, which of course, the many of them will be transcribed, or you can go watch him do it too. I'm sure he probably even has videos on it. So if you got really keen, you could go grab one. But my point here is that, he's one of those few guitar players that really just can deliver on a whole nother level. And it's apparent in the playing and with the music. So he's got to be on the list. Thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate every single one of you. I hope you guys have a killer Thursday. We'll see you in the next one.